Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for joining us. Tonight's top story is all about the cold snap we're in, and while there are temptations to get on the ice that's been forming as a result, you might want to think twice. Dawson Chen has more.
It's not looking too good. With weeks of sub-zero temperatures ahead of us, it's safe to say Windsor, Essex is in the depths of winter right now. But you know what's not safe? The ice in our area. Essex County OPP are reminding the public that going out on the ice always involves risk. And with weather fluctuations and climate change happening, OPP spokesperson Constable Stephen Duguay has a simple warning. Think twice about the ice.
I think once we get ice, because it happens so infrequently the last couple of years, that people get excited. I think people have a false sense of security when they see solid ice. They may check the level of ice and say, there's a couple inches here. It should be able to hold up a human being. What we want to make sure is people understand that anything under 4 inches of ice isn't really safe for an average sized person.
But why don't we know this? The Windsor-Essex region is full of creeks, streams, and tributaries, not to mention rivers and lakes. And it's not like winter ever skips a year. Stephanie Bacalar is with the Life Saving Society of Ontario. She says people are cavalier because people don't think it'll happen to them.
We see throughout drowning prevention that people tend to have an "it won't happen to me" attitude. So we do really need to raise awareness and have people understand that the unthinkable does happen. Drownings are far too common in Ontario and across Canada, but they are preventable.
Both the OPP and the Life Saving Society say ice needs to be at least 4 inches thick to support just one person. Snowmobiles need 6 inches. Cars need at least 8. And that's assuming the ice is clear and solid. Bacalar says there's another weaker kind of ice that's more dangerous.
Dirty ice happens when temperatures go really cold and then they warm up a bit. Cold, warm up, cold, warm up. You can actually have pockets of water and like mushy slush and things like that in there. And that creates really weak ice that is very dangerous to be walking on.
The Life Saving Society reminds us that cold water can be lethal. That's because of what's called cold incapacitation. Your body shutting down blood flow to your limbs to preserve your core warmth. It can take as little as 10 minutes before you literally can't move. Dawson Chen, CBC News, Windsor.
From ice on the water to ice and snow on sidewalks. The city is reminding residents and businesses that it is their responsibility to keep their sidewalks clear. So far, 85 complaints have come in to 311. Property owners are first given a warning, and then if nothing is done after 24 hours, a contractor is brought in to clear the path. That bill is then sent to the home or business.
Right now, if that snow is sitting on there and getting packed down, that's going to be turned into ice and virtually impossible to come down to come off the sidewalk. So our contractor is going to have to use other tools and measures to take care of that issue. So hiring a contractor is going to be a lot more expensive, and homeowners can be faced with a $300, $400 penalty applied to their taxes. So and plus it makes your neighbors angry if you're not doing it because they can't pass by.
Our Mike Evans braved the cold to ask some of you if you think the sidewalks are maintained well enough.
No. Over the years, it's gotten to be less and less. More important to do the downtown core touristy areas, but other areas where the city owns property, it's like almost like it's a second thought. You pay a lot of tax dollars, and some of the side streets don't get looked after.
I think it's doing an okay job for now, but I definitely can be improved, especially at night. I've slipped a few times. My friends have slipped a few times as well. So I think it can do a better job.
So it's not just a matter of shoveling the snow, it's a matter of putting down something to keep people from slipping.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Maybe if they put a bit more salt, it'll be better for everyone.
And a good time to bring in Colette Kennedy for a quick look at that weather forecast. Colette, it's been freezing. How much longer is that going to stick around for?
Yeah, and we know with these issues with ice, it happens often that if you get a rise in temperatures and then a freeze again, we get issues where there might be ice under the snowpack. And we're looking at that as we move forward in time with a warm up coming this weekend and then very cold air moving in Sunday into Monday. So this is lake effect, this snow you're picking up here on the radar with the winds, but this is synoptic, an actual system that's going to be moving in. So bringing some flurries into our skies. -10 for the low tonight, still in the cold air, -2 tomorrow. It warms up after that. I'll have all the details coming up.
Thanks, Colette. Turning now to another story that we've been following. As we've been reporting for weeks, Donald Trump has threatened tariffs on all Canadian goods when he becomes U.S. president on Monday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has met with all the premiers to chart a possible response. Now, while they're not revealing what that will be, almost all of them are attempting to show a united front. But as Olivia Stefanovich reports, Danielle Smith is objecting to having Alberta's oil as a bargaining chip.
Premiers arrived in the nation's capital in a last-ditch effort to deliver a unified message.
We cannot let President Trump divide us.
But before their meeting with the Prime Minister even began, tensions threatened to split Team Canada.
There's one thing that's more important than jurisdictions, is standing up for the country. Country comes first over anything.
Divisions remained over how aggressive Canada should respond to Donald Trump's threats.
A broad-based tariff war is not good for Canada. Canada does not do well in that environment.
Specifically, whether Canada should consider withholding oil and gas exports to the U.S.
I see energy as Canada's queen in this game of chess. We don't need to expose our queen too early.
Some leaders have tried to strike on their own. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith visited Mar-a-Lago without letting Ottawa or the other provinces know.
We didn't get a heads up, no. I'm interested in learning more.
With Inauguration Day less than a week away and no sign of Trump backing off.
Perhaps we need to take a step back and ask, what is the strategy?
Premiers are looking to Ottawa for answers.
Why do we have an economy that can be crushed on a whim by a president?
There was not any doubt that we would be dealing with tariffs. I think it was always about trying to minimize the impact.
The Prime Minister says they all share a common goal.
We will have already been and will continue to be united in standing up for all Canadians, standing up for the national interest.
The meeting lasted more than an hour longer than expected, and although the premiers and the Prime Minister appeared together in a closing news conference projecting a united front, Alberta's Premier, who appeared at the meeting virtually, took to social media to criticize the federal government for continuing to float the idea of using Alberta's oil in Canada's retaliatory response. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
There has been a major breakthrough in the Middle East crisis. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release. The deal comes after intense negotiations in Doha. It consists of 3 phases and is set to go into effect on Sunday.
Phase 1 of the agreement will go on for 42 days, and it will include a ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces to the east away from populated areas. Israeli forces will then be positioned along the Gaza border, and which will allow for the swap of prisoners as well as the swap of remains and the return of the displaced people to their residences.
Under the terms, Hamas will release 33 Israeli hostages during Phase 1, including children, the elderly, and the sick or wounded. They will be exchanged for a number of Palestinian prisoners in Israel. The first phase will also see an increased flow of relief and humanitarian aid and fuel into Gaza. There will also be a focus on getting hospitals, health centers, and bakeries running again. Officials say the details of the next 2 phases will be finalized during the implementation of the first round. And folks here in Windsor are reacting to this major development. Here's what some of you had to say.
Obviously, there's a huge sense of joy and relief, but I would say that it's a very cautious joy and a cautious sense of relief, trying to evaluate what this actually means, because it could mean a lot of different things. I don't think it's as straightforward as like, oh, there's a ceasefire, so Palestine is free. I think is a step in that direction. But this is far from over, and the future of Gaza is still obviously very uncertain. We deserve to have this sense of relief, but we also know better that in the history of the Palestinian struggle, there have been many attempts to broker peace. There have been many attempts for ceasefires, and Israel, as this colonial occupying power, has never taken respect for Palestinian lives and safety and peace seriously.
I'm just thinking about the people who have spent now 2 winters in tents with starvation, lack of food, lack of resources, lack of water, lack of medicine. And then after all of this, with constant bombardment and movement, being displaced from one place to another, I'm thinking about the joy and the relief they must be feeling, and how after almost 500 days of genocide, they were able to finally count their dead and mourn them. I think so many people for the past year and a half have spent daily, they would wake up, check the news. Is their family dead? Is their family alive? So this is a moment where I guess you don't have to do that anymore. But we're just looking for everybody to say this needs to be permanent. And this needs to be an actual ceasefire, not a ceasefire by name.
The Windsor Jewish Federation did not want to do an interview, but in an email said, "We welcome news of the deal to release dozens of hostages and hopefully create a framework to speedily release the remaining hostages. There is still much work to be done and significant uncertainty ahead. But we are hopeful that this first phase of the ceasefire agreement will pave a way forward for hostilities to end and for an era of security and rebuilding for both Israel and her neighbors." The Canadian Real Estate Association has released its report for December. It shows 2024 ended on a high note with increases in both home sales and prices. CBC's Scott Peterson has the details.
There are signs of life with the Canadian real estate market this morning, both in terms of sales and of prices. This is according to the Canadian Real Estate Association for the month of December. They're looking at sales increasing, and everyone's been watching to see how many more buyers will come into the market now that we're seeing a trend of lower interest rates. Let's get right to the report for December this morning. Sales month over month, a little bit soggy, 5.8% to the downside. But since the Bank of Canada started lowering interest rates back in June, we're seeing sales up 13% since then. Over this time last year, sales up close to 20%. We're also seeing overall in the fourth quarter, sales up 10% quarter over quarter, making it one of the strongest quarters in the last 20 years. Now, new listings down 1.7% month over month, but a multiple listing service that CREA controls, we're seeing about 128,000 properties listed for sale, and that's up about 7.8% as far as the volume of what's listed there from this time last year. Now, probably most important to a lot of buyers and sellers out there is the national sales price. That's creeping up as well, up 2.5% over this time last year. The average home price in the country is now just over $676,000. It's down from a longer term trend just a few years ago, but you can see the trend is creeping up there. Now, some of the predictions are they're expecting to see buyers coming into this market, quote unquote, in big numbers in the next few months, and that's in anticipation of traditionally what is the busy springtime market for real estate. But there is a caveat from some of the banks. TD Bank, for example, a little bit more cautious, saying that there is a lot of uncertainty out there as far as the predictions goes because of a potential tariff imposition by the U.S. economy. So lots of question marks regarding that. But overall, the strength of the real estate market is showing somewhat to be buoyant with lower interest rates overall. Scott Peterson, CBC News, Toronto.
Earlier in the show, Dawson Chen's report talked about the danger posed by ice on waterways, something seen firsthand in Massachusetts. Local police had to jump into a freezing lake in Greater Boston recently to save a man and his dog. Here's the video. Police say that the dog fell through the ice and the owner followed in an attempt to save his pet. Rescuers from the local fire department used a tether to crawl over towards the hole, and it was all caught on drone camera. First, the team pulled the man out of the frigid waters, and then they did it all again, going back for the dog and bringing it safely to shore. The man was taken to hospital, and the dog went to a vet, and police say they're both okay. Wow, what a story. So glad everybody is all right there. A live look outside. Another cold night ahead of us with freezing temperatures continuing tomorrow. Stay with us. We'll have more news right after the break. Welcome back. We've been following the wildfires around Los Angeles. The area is home to a large Canadian population, and many are among those who have lost everything to the fires. Lindsay Duncombe reports.
It's like we're starting over again, starting our life again.
Brian Hughes grabbed one guitar when he left his Altadena home and music studio. The rest are gone.
So how many guitars did you lose?
About 40.
40?
Yeah.
Hughes is originally from Edmonton. He leads the tour band for Canadian Celtic singer-songwriter Lorena McKennitt. His home was a place where people would gather to create music.
It was like a little oasis.
For now, he and his wife are staying with a friend from Ontario, soon moving to the California condo of a former guitar student from Edmonton.
And he said, hey man, you can, stay in my condo in Pasadena, till, middle of March, or maybe even longer if you want.
The hardest part is the
anxiety of not knowing what's next.
This is my grandmother's.
Karen Weber's family lost their home in the Palisades. What they grabbed when they had to flee? So Canadian.
And we took the skates, of course. Yeah, didn't get the hockey equipment, but we got the skates.
They just managed to secure a rental home. It's been tough.
And the prices are going higher and higher and higher. They're asking for 2-year leases, which is crazy when you're like so frantic. In the back of our mind, we're thinking maybe we'll spread our money a little better and come back to Vancouver for a couple months and before we even start the building process.
With the leaves and the forest pattern, because that's what I left behind to come down here.
NASA scientist Raymond Francis saved the quilt his grandma made him to remind him of Sudbury.
A few little mementos.
And this space-themed box of precious mementos.
Here's my friend and the driveway.
He had just purchased his Altadena home. He's had offers to come stay in Canada too.
But in the end, I came here to explore the planets, and that's where we do this. So I'm going to do my best to stay here. Rover missions.
But like so many Canadians at the top of their fields, LA is the place to be. However changed it is. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Los Angeles.
An international group of experts is proposing new ways to define and diagnose obesity by moving away from the controversial body mass index and reducing stigma. Mike Crawley has more.
Sandra Bernison volunteers with a weight loss support group called TOPS, which stands for Taking Off Pounds Sensibly. She hears from members how obesity affects their lives.
They're made to feel like they're not as good as a person that's slim.
BMI stands for Body Mass Index.
For decades, obesity has been defined by body mass index, a ratio of weight to height. Medical experts believe BMI is too blunt an instrument.
It doesn't tell me anything about your body fat, your muscle.
Canadian pediatrician Catherine Morrison runs this lab at McMaster University that can accurately measure people's metabolism. She's on the international panel that agreed on a new way to define and to diagnose obesity.
Very important to enable folks to get the treatment that they need. The advantage of them is
the key shift, emphasizing the health effects of excess body fat.
This removes, we hope, the sort of burden on the individual that they have in some way caused this condition for themselves, and that we will treat it as we do any other disease like cancer and type 2 diabetes.
The new diagnosis is officially called clinical obesity. The experts say the change communicates that obesity can be a serious illness, not a mere lifestyle choice. It means doctors will need to consider how excess fat is harming a person's organs or limiting their daily activity to make a diagnosis. This obesity specialist supports the shift.
Diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver, all of those medical conditions, real medical conditions that cause death, should be addressed by a medical team. A larger body size should not be addressed by a medical team.
Obesity increases the risk of diabetes, heart disease, and some cancers. The commission that developed the new definition says the growing use of weight loss drugs makes it all the more important to diagnose obesity accurately. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Hamilton.
We'll have Colette with us right after the break. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy joins us again for more on weather. Colette, we are in the thick of winter temperatures right now, but some milder vibes ahead.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a couple of systems that are going to come through, and this next one is actually going to, once we get past it, bring our temperatures up a little bit for a few days. The one after that, that is one to be reckoned with, because we will get plunged into some much colder air, kind of like where we are now, but actually even colder. Our current temperatures of -6 to -8, the range in terms of what is on the thermometer. Now we look at the winds, and in most cases it's a southwesterly flow that we're getting, and that's enhancing some lake effect flurries, but it's also giving this wind chill, one of the coldest. Chatham-Kent -16, but feeling that for Kitchener, and not far behind Windsor right now, -15, the wind chill. So this is some of that lake enhancement, and some of that is winding down a little bit, but even as it does, this next system is going to be moving in that's back here to the west. Now, what it is mostly going to do is bring kind of a widespread flurry to light snow activity off and on through the day as we get, even starting tonight in southwestern Ontario, through the day Thursday. Then behind that is when we get a bit of a reprieve, a couple of days where it's slightly milder, but back behind this next front, this much colder air is going to be moving in. But in terms of its arrival, that's not going to be till later on Saturday and kind of then into the second half of the weekend and the beginning of next week. So enjoy the milder air while we can, if you like it a little bit milder. And then after that, just be prepared for what's coming. Snowfall potential, this may even be a little bit on the high side. I would expect more of a dusting to a few centimeters. The differences being in areas really being affected by the lakes. 8 centimeters towards Goderich. In fact, there'll be areas there looking at 10 to 15 centimeters, but elsewhere it is much lighter. Overnight temperatures, that -9 to -11 range. But then tomorrow we climb to -2, still a little breezy, but it's from the southwest in terms of those winds. Friday, we get above freezing, if you can believe it there. Maybe even some sunny breaks. If so, I would expect that where we get into some of that kind of for the second half of the day, not so much in the morning on Friday. Saturday, a light mix as that stronger system comes in, but just know with it, some strong winds. So the wind chills will be significant with that colder air.
Thanks for that, Colette. And thanks so much to you all for watching. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good night.